Hello, we're from Group 1, and today we are going to discuss translation methods. There are numerous resources on the internet to learn about this concept, but this time we'll look at a case study presented in a journal article titled Kinds of Translation Method Used by the Students in Translating Descriptive Text from English to Indonesian. Please keep an eye out for the reference at the end of this presentation. The next slide will be presented by Sofia. So Sofia, please go ahead.
Okay. Abstract. This research aims to analyze the kinds of translation methods used by the 8th grade students at Yayasan Perguruan Karya Bakti Junior High School. The findings of this research showed that there are only 4 methods used in translating the text: literal, faithful, word-for-word, and free translation. They are the most dominant in this school. There are 10 students the first is literal translation and faithful translation, and the second dominant was word-for-word translation and free translation method. Introduction. As described by Peter Newmark, translation professional over a variety of translation methods, including the 8th method, the first word-for-word translation. It returns to the source language by translating the words without paying attention to the phrase. Second, literal translation. It's same meaning with word-for-word translation in general, but the translator have adjustment with the target translation because it is usually used to translate a holy book and etc. The third, faithful translation. To reproduce the precise contextual meaning of the original, it transfers the cultural words and preserves the degree of grammatical and lexical abnormality in the translation. Fourth, free translation reproduces the matter without the manner or the content without the form of the original, and usually called intralingual translation. The fifth, semantic translation. There is a balance between the source language and the source target by looking at the phrase when translating the words. Sixth, idiomatic translation reproduces the message of the original but tends to distort nuances of meaning by preferring colloquialisms and idioms where does not exist in the original the text. Seventh, adaptation translation used mainly for plays like comedy and poetry. There is the themes, characters, plots are usually preserved, and the last, communicative translation, attempts to render the exact contextual meaning of the original and readily acceptable and comprehensible to readership, both of the content and the language. Descriptive text is a sensory experience involving the sense of sight, hearing, and taste. Claims Can 2000 at page 352. The focus of portrayals is typically on visual interaction, but they also negotiate with other types of recognition. The next slide will be presented by Viville.
Okay, thank you, Sofia. Now we're going to take a look at the research method. The first one is the research approach. This research approach uses descriptive qualitative, and the design of this research is a case study, which is a type of ethnographic investigation that centers on a single entity, such as a person, a group, an organization, or a program. Second one is the subject and sample. Well, the subject of the research focused on the 8th grade of SMP Yayasan Perguruan Karya Bakti. And the researchers chose one class, which consists of 10 students as the sample of this study. The third one is data source. The source of data is a descriptive text about animals taken from English and in Focus for Grade 8, a junior high school book, on the KTSP basis. The data of this research will be presented in a written form in which it will describe the results of the analysis related to the kinds of translation methods used in translating the descriptive text. The fourth one is the instruments. As stated in the journal, the researchers are the key instrument in the study. The researchers use two types of instruments. The first one is a test about translating English text into Bahasa Indonesia. And in collecting this data, the researchers did some procedures. The first one is the researchers shared a paper of a descriptive text to the students. The second one, the researchers guided the students to read the text first. The third one is the researchers instructed the students to translate the text. The fourth one is the researchers limited the time. And the last one is after the student had finished, the researchers collected the student's paper. And the second instrument is an interview protocol, which consists of 10 questions. Next slide, please. Okay, the following are the analysis techniques used in this research. The first one is data collection. As I mentioned before, in this research, the analysts collected data from students through interviews and tests. The second one is data reduction. Data reduction is a method of sorting and selecting relevant data for an investigation. Therefore, data reduction can be a preparation for reordering and transforming the data from the structured information frame through changing, sharing, and summarizing the data. The third one is data display. In this study, the researchers use qualitative data, which is presented in the form of transcripts of the translation methods that students used in the translation process, which you can find when reading the article. And the last one is data verification. It displays conclusions from the data that has been collected by the study. The researchers interpreted the data display analysis. The results show that through data verification, the researchers have the possibility to make conclusions and confirm the translation methods used by the students in the translation process. The next one will be presented by Zami. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Viville. So we've come to the result of the research itself. So researchers discovered some of the most frequently used techniques by students from the translation methods they examined during data collection. And they also discovered some study response to questions about the difficulties they encountered while translating the text. Next one, please. And here is the graph of the kinds of translation method used by the students. So you can see there is 4 methods that use by the students. There is 13% of literal translation and faithful translation. And then the next one is word-for-word translation, which contains 25% of the students. And the last one is free translation that 15% of the students use this method. Next slide, please. In the main results, we believe that is common to our questions. That is, how do students use those methods? The first one is literal translation. This method is used because the grammar construction source is converted to the closest grammar target. With this method, students translate the text as close as possible to the text in the target language. The second one is faithful translation. By using this method, students are expected to produce contextual meanings that are correct from the original within the limits of the target grammar. Therefore, to communicate the researcher's goal, students must be able to translate meaning of the search language. These two methods are the most chosen by the students because both, according to the students, are used to understand more and convey the true meaning of the search language. The next slide. The third one, there is a word-for-word translation. By using this method, they often choose the wrong meaning of the word, and the translation sounds unusual to the reader because they translate it word by word using the most common meaning. The last one is free translation. By using this method, students translate freely and do not pay attention to the original form because the search for equivalence tends to occur at the level of paragraph discourse. For these last two methods, the students explained that it was very difficult to understand the true meaning of the text that had to be translated because the procedure was not common as usual, and students were required to translate the text word by word without looking at the whole sentence when translating the word. And I think this is the last points I can represent of the result, and I will return it to Viville. Thank you.
Okay, here's the reference that we used for this presentation. That's all that we can talk about in this presentation. Thank you very much for watching and see you next time.